Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our lecture of today. We are going to have a lovely lecture done by our friend. It's going to talk about dealing with challenging and difficulties in life. No one has that, so I know you guys don't need it. I don't need it, so it's going to be like an easy one. You take notes for your friends, okay? So as always, before we start, our friend Patrick is going to do our initial reading and prayer for us.
Good morning. So, be open to new ideas. Discuss them, compare them with what you know and think. Get the most benefit possible out of information that is new to you. Healthy ideas renew the emotions and supply the feelings with stimulate and enthusiasm. Nobody is so wise that they do not need to learn more, or so complete that they can dispense with other contributions to their inner growth. Learn more and be receptive to new contributions. So let's now close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, to God. Thank the opportunity to be here another week and ask the mentors to involve our friend Isabella that's giving today the lecture for us. Thank you, and so be it.
Hi everyone, good morning. So today our lecture is about dealing with challenges and difficulties in life. Sorry. Sorry, which one here? Perfect, thanks. So I think I wanted to start this lecture with this message because I think it's really strong and it's something that gives us hope. This too shall pass. And the story about this, as told by Chico Xavier, is that he was going through hardships, a very difficult time, and Emmanuel told him that he got a message from the Mother of Jesus, from Mary, and he was very shocked by that. So he started crying even before the message, and Emmanuel said, you have to write this down, write every word that I say, and this message was only 4 words, so the message was, this too shall pass. And at the end, it was like, oh, now I get it. So he was very grateful for that message. And that's the idea that bad times will pass, but also happy times will pass. And that's it gives you a sense of gratitude, because even the happy times, at some point they're gonna go away, but you have to enjoy it because it's not forever. But I mean, you have to have hope, because this too shall pass. And that's a beautiful message that I got as well from a spiritual center. All things on earth pass away. The days of difficulties will pass. The days of bitterness and loneliness will also pass. The pain and tears will pass. The frustrations that make us cry, one day they will pass. The longing for a loved one who leaves us at the hand of death will pass. The days of worldly glories and triumphs, in which we believe we're bigger and better than others, will also pass. This internal vanity that makes us feel like the center of the universe will one day pass. Days of sadness, days of happiness, these are the necessary lessons that on earth pass away, leaving the accumulated experiences in the immortal spirit. If today for us is one of the days full of bitterness, let us stop for a moment. Let us elevate our thoughts and seek the soft voice of the loving mother, lovingly telling us, this too shall pass. And let us be certain, through the difficulties we have already overcome, that there is no evil that lasts forever. So this is a beautiful message that it's found at one of the Spiritist Center's websites, and it comes from a message from Chico Xavier, but edited by the Spiritist Center. So trials and difficulties. So to begin, of course, we are in the world of trials and expiation. So of course, everyone here was going to go through hard times and good times. And everyone suffers in a different way. And it goes beyond appearances because when we grow up, we think celebrities are very happy, or somebody that you admire is super happy, and there's of course that nothing ever happened to this person because look at them, like they're so successful, they are beautiful, they have everything. But it goes, of course, beyond the appearances, and everyone goes through something that sometimes we don't see it. And we should not compare the amount of suffering. So if somebody went through a hardship, could be a divorce, could be like they're getting fired, or it could be anything that happens. Sometimes we tend to, oh, it's okay, and they're gonna be fine, but you don't know if they need help or not. So we don't really measure the amount of pain in others because you don't have the experience that they had. It could be a trigger for something else. Two people could lose a loved one, and one could be okay with that experience and could be accepting and resigned to that feeling. Other people going through exactly the same experience, they could go into depression, or they could be in a hardship for a really long time. So the idea is we never compare the amount of suffering if it's through in other people. And suffering, a good definition that I found is it redeems debts and carry out learnings in the moral field. And sometimes they're linked to past trials, but it could be a consequence for the current life. So most of the times you're suffering because it could be a debt from other incarnations, but it could also be something that you did in this life that you have to pay in this life. So it could be both. And most of the times we ask for it. So most of the times, if it is something that it's really significant in your life, like a hardship, difficulty, before incarnating, you might have asked for it. There's something that you need to learn, that you thought that with this experience you're gonna overcome it, and most of the time that makes sense. So when you go through it, sometimes you have to think, do I think I asked for it? What should I learn from this experience? Because it's what happens. And what happens sometimes, we think we overestimate our abilities to go through some hardships. So that's why some people have a harder time than they want. Okay, so Judas example. So I was going through some content for this lecture, and I found this example. So there's a story that before Jesus came to Earth, there was kind of a meeting. So all the spirits involved would be understanding what was going to happen. So all the apostles and everyone linked to that situation would understand what was going to happen, and they were, of course, when they incarnated, we don't have that memories, but in that situation, so all the apostles were there, and of course Jesus, and when they went through what was going to happen on Earth, all the crucifixion and all the challenges, all the conflicts. So Judas said to Jesus, "From all your followers, I'm going to be the most loyal." So he said that, it's told that he said that to Jesus, but look what happened. Because we don't have the memories that we and all the promises that we made before incarnating. So sometimes we make those mistakes, but it's part of the experience. And how do we react to the trials and difficulties? The reaction is even more important than the challenge, because we know we go through different kinds of challenges, but it's really how you react to it and not really what's the challenge. Just like anxiety, so it's very common nowadays. It's how you react to anxiety. It's more important than what's the root, what's the reason for that anxiety, because once you understand how to deal with it, you're going to be able to be more resilient and deal with that feeling. So it's always important to think what's the root of our problems, and sometimes we're blind to the true causes of suffering. So when we think with why I'm going through that experience, and why is there anything that I have to learn from that experience? Maybe something that it's a skill that you need for something else, or maybe that you have to learn to develop empathy to other people. An example for you think about NGOs. Most of the times NGOs are created by someone that went through a hardship, and now that person wants to do charity and help other people go through the same thing, and look at what was the difficulty that happened to that person versus what are the outcome, like how many people were helped because of that difficulty. So that a lot of things a lot of silver lining, a lot of good things that come from these trials and difficulties, especially when you apply those learnings to help other people. And that's, I think, one of the best ways to deal with the difficulty is to help somebody go through the same thing. And that's another really interesting message. What are the true causes of suffering? In what we suffer the most in the world? It's not the difficulty, it's the discouragement in overcoming it. It's not the trial, it's the despair in the face of suffering. It's not the disease, it's the dread of receiving it. It's not the unhappy relative, it's the sorrow of having them in the family. It's not the failure, it's the stubbornness of not recognizing your own mistakes. It's not ingratitude, it's the inability to love without selfishness. It's not your own self-esteem, it is the revolt against the superiority of others. It's not the insults, it's the wounded pride. It's not the temptation, it's the pleasure of trying out questionable ideas. It's not the old age of the body, it's the passion for appearances. As it's easy to see, in solving any problem, the worst problem is the load of affliction we create, develop and sustain against us. So as you see, there's a bunch of problems, but the problem is actually like the pain and the affliction that comes out of it that not necessarily has to come out of it. So the sufferings might be your own creation sometimes, because we have pride, we are selfish, and we are stubborn. And the message is from a book by Chico Xavier as well. And another interesting story from Joanna, wife of Chusa. So this is some part of those stories are on the Bible. So Joanna was the wife of a tax collector. So she had means, she had way more resources than most people at the time. And when Jesus started doing what he did, she was a follower and she put a lot of resources into that. And that was not through this elite society at the time, like of course they didn't do that, but she still was helping as much as she could. And it got to a point that eventually her husband, that was the tax collector, was bankrupt and he didn't have anything. So after the crucifixion of Jesus, they started persecuting the Christians, and she was held captive with her son. Her son was not necessarily Christian; he was not following, but she had very strong faith. But they were both carried by the persecutors, and they wanted to burn her and burn her son as well. And so the son was telling her, "Mom, we just have to say we're not Christians, because if we renounce Jesus, they're gonna let us go. Like we just have to say we're not, and we're gonna be fine." But she was a woman of faith. She didn't want to renounce Jesus in any moment. So she was, why should you, son, renounce Jesus? And they were having this conversation. The guard was listening to that, and and hearing this, the soldier approached it and said, and was mocking Joanna and her son. "Woman, is that all that Jesus taught you, to die with courage?" And Joanna replied, "No, Jesus also taught me to love you." So in that moment, they went through the sacrifice place, and they were burned. So this was one of the first sacrifices of the Christians. But eventually, she became a martyr, amongst the first Christians, and she went through several lives as Santa Teresa d'Avila, a doctor of the Catholic Church, and eventually she is also Joana de Angelis, the mentor of Divaldo Franco, so one of the famous spiritist mediums in Brazil. So all these experiences are leading through a path of enlightenment, of evolution. And this is a mindset to go through hardships that I found that was really interesting. To be honest, I saw on TikTok and it's like, oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna bring it to the lecture. So it's called Either Way We Will Win. If you think about it, has God ever failed you? Because if you really want something, either way you're gonna win. It either goes as planned, exactly what you asked for, or it goes the way it's something better for you. So God knows what's best for you. So you have either way you're gonna win. So if you don't get exactly what you wanted, that's the reason why. And then you're gonna get something better, or you're gonna avoid something that could be bad for you. So either way, you win. Either way, it's gonna be the best for you because God knows best what's better for you. You don't know what you want. So it's what we want versus what's best for you. And I thought about an example in my own life. In a time, I really wanted a job, promotion. So I really wanted to ask for it for so long. And this job is everything that I wanted. When I have this job, like everything's going to be fine. I asked it so much for it and it took a while, but eventually I got it. And I had to burn out because of that job. So I got what I wanted, but was the best for me? Should I maybe ask for God to give me a job that I'm going to be happy and it's going to help my career? Maybe that was a better way of praying. And people were in the comments on TikTok, they were saying, a good way of praying is exactly saying, please God, give me this or something better. It's interesting to talk about the difficulties leads to empathy towards order. And Chico has an interesting story as well. So in Brazil, there is a homeless kid in front of a bakery. It's a very common thing in Brazil, unfortunately. And he really wanted a piece of cake. And he was in front of the bakery asking everyone who's coming by, can you buy this piece of cake for me? Because he was really craving. He was hungry, but he actually just wanted this piece of cake. And everyone was just ignoring. He was like an hour there asking for like everyone to buy this piece of cake. And the homeless man that also didn't have much money, was living on the streets, didn't have any money. He understood what he was going through because he also went through the same challenge. So when he saw that situation, he said, like, I know exactly what you're feeling. And he got a few coins that he had collected throughout the day, and he bought the piece of cake to the kid. So it says that when we go through something, we understand what other people go through, and we are more caring towards them. And this really helps our evolution and the way we think about others. And as I mentioned, the charity as a means to re-signify difficulties or traumas. So there are many NGOs that are created by people that went through for something, and that became their purpose, that life legacy, because they went through that. Now they're helping so many people, and they are really happy about the impact that they have created. And also, it's important to mention resignation. So if obedience is the constant of the reason or logic, resignation is the constant of the heart, because sometimes it's not really logic, but you have to follow your heart and resign. So being resigned is the understanding of the reason for things, which does not stop us from suffering, but give us the joy of knowing that we are progressing. So it's when we go through something that's really challenging, but you accept it. So it's the feeling of acceptance and to be open to that experience, and instead of fighting and thinking like a victim or thinking like something is unfair and God is unfair and something in your life is ruined. So it's accepting the challenge is like, gonna be okay. I'm gonna accept it. And if I'm going through, it's because I have to go through and God wants me to go through, because either way I'm winning. So if something bad happens, that's the best for me that can happen at the moment. But at the same time, resignation should not be seen as something passive or the sense of inertia facing the challenges of life. It's not just being there and accepting whatever, being very passive. It means it's more active. So you resign on purpose, thinking that is the best that can happen to you. So it's a movement of active force of the soul, focusing on internal changes, not letting external circumstances define your inner state, not letting challenge experience crush and take away the joy of living. So that's the idea of resignation. And a beautiful idea as well when we deal with challenges, because sometimes challenges could be a trial or a difficult time could happen because of something that's accidental and no one caused that on purpose. But it also could be a conflict with somebody or a situation that you were dealing with other people that you have a conflict. And in this case, it's important the sense of forgiveness. So this story is one that it's really touched me. So it's twins, Eva and Unicorn. Maybe you have heard of their story. So they arrived, May 1943, they arrived in Auschwitz. So their whole family were brought to Auschwitz. And that moment when they separate people, they were with the mother and they separate the mother and the kids. And they realized they're twins. So a guard yelled, twins, twins. And then they got it. And the mother just asked the guard, is that good? And the guard said yes. And then she said yes, they are twins. So they were separated from the family, and then the family at the time, they all died right away the same day. And they are keeping the twins because they were doing experiments. So they had like a doctor, a group of doctors, they were doing experiments on twins specifically, and they liked her. They liked them because they had this Aryan features like blue eyes and the skin tone. And they were kept in a different, almost like in a hospital on their lab in Auschwitz for this experiments. And they went through a lot of experience, really painful. They wanted to see what happens to the twins when you do something different and how they react to it. And they went through 2 years of suffering. And they didn't want to die because if one of the twins died, they didn't need the other person, so the other person would die. So they really fought for their lives because they knew, like, if I die, my sister is gonna go away as well. They say that more than 1,500 pairs of twins went through this. So it's a lot of people, a lot of twins. And some of the experiments, they remove organs without anesthetics. A lot of injections that they have no idea what it was. But eventually, they survived these 2 years until the camp was liberated. And they were of course like very in a fragile state, but they survived. And the doctors, one of the main doctors was it's called Mengele. So he's kind of famous among the Nazi doctors at the time because he was the head of the experiences, and they had a lot of contact with this doctor. I mean, and I would love to say that he was prosecuted and he went to jail, but actually he flew right away when the camp was liberated. He flew to South America. A lot of Nazis went to Argentina and in South America, and surprisingly he died in Brazil. He was in a resort in São Paulo, and he drowned and he died in Brazil. And actually he's in the cemetery. He was there at the time. Like, people didn't know because of course he was using a different name, so he was never found once he was alive. But back to the twins. So they survived, and they grew up. They had families, of course, with a lot of traumas. And that at the time, there was a lot of denial. Like in the 80s and the 70s, there was a lot of denial, like what really happened in the camps. So they were telling their story, and they were reconnecting the other twins that went through this traumatic experience. They created an organization that's called Candles children of Auschwitz Nazi death lab experiment survivors. So they were helping other survivors go through the trauma and that experience. Eva, one of them, so she was very outspoken and she wrote a book. She was part of documentaries. Eventually, they are going through this documentary work. Somebody connected her with an ex-doctor. Of course, he was not a Nazi anymore, but he was there during that time, and they were able to talk. So he invited her to his home in Germany, and she went there, and they had a talk. She proposed him to sign a document saying everything that happens, to help those denial claims, everything that happened there, and he really wanted to sign the document because he wanted to prove that as well. And after he signed the document, she wrote a letter of forgiveness to him, to this institution, and to what's really happened in that situation, and that's really beautiful. She was very criticized because a lot of course, the survivors and the Jew community, they were like, why are you forgiving? Like, look at this, like, it killed all your family. From everything that you can think of how somebody can hurt you, they did everything to her. Everything, killed the family or everything. She lost everything, and she'll still be able to forgive. So she forgave that doctor, and eventually she was able to forgive Dr. Mengele, which is like the head of the lab. So it's a beautiful story that she tells us about forgiveness. So this is from the website of this organization, and this is all her ideas. Forgiveness is a way of healing oneself from pain, from trauma and tragedy. It is a means of self-liberation and self-empowerment. Forgiveness is not forgetting. This concept of forgiveness has little or nothing to do with the perpetrator. It has everything to do with the need of the victims to be free from the pain inflicted upon them. This concept of forgiveness has nothing to do with any religion, because as I was reading, it's like, that's very like Christian and Spiritism, even though it's not Christian, but it, of course, has nothing to do with any religion. Forgiveness is more than just letting go. It's proactive rather than passive. We become victims involuntarily when a person or entity with power takes away our power to use our minds or body or both. Forgiveness unclars one's mind and life, permitting us to view the world through unobstructed vision. And a quote from her as well: anger is a seed for war, forgiveness is a seed for peace. So it's just beautiful that she worked all her life to connect with the victims, to help them, and bring this message that's applied to all of us. In the same theme, I'm not sure if you saw the movie Zone of Interest. It's very, very new. I think it came out last year. So it's a message about how we react towards other suffering. So this story, it's about it's a real family that lived beside the concentration camp. So this was Auschwitz, behind the wall. And this Nazi family, they had a beautiful life on the other side of the wall. So they had a family, they had a garden, pool, like amazing evening with the amazing time with the kids. In this movie, you don't see what's happening on the other side of the wall, you only see the family. So basically, they want us to follow that family and all the things that they care. They care about the garden, they care about the flowers, like what's happening with that, and they completely ignore what's happening behind the wall, all of them. And that's a message about like how we're able to ignore other people's suffering. That's very similar in that sense. And in some situations, the noise of the concentration camps, or the people screaming and everything, it's very loud. So in order to listen to what people are saying, like the Nazi family, you have to tone down like the noise from that concentration camp to listen to them. So you're basically doing exactly what they did. So it's kind of brilliant in that way and it feels very familiar, because I think the whole idea of the movie is to feel familiar, so you can feel like It's very uncomfortable. So it's a movie that you see and you don't want to see it again because it's very, very uncomfortable. And the director says that the wall is sort of a manifestation of how we compartmentalize the suffering of others and normalize exactly the suffering that we see every day. And it's nothing exceptional or dynamic in that family. It's grotesquely familiar. And I think that we were trying to do with the film, it was to find a space and create a space for the viewer that could project themselves onto them. It's not saying what they did, but it's saying, look at what we do now. So the whole idea is how we see somebody suffering, or we see the conflicts in the world, or we just ignore it and we just follow with our life, and there is a wall separating us from the suffering of others. It's you reflect a lot throughout this movie. So back to the suffering. How can my suffering help me? So there's so many ways that we can, the silver linings of all those experiences. So this is just a list. So for example, building resilience, going through these difficulties, you can create skills that could help you through life, could help your kids, could help your family, and just make you stronger. Developing empathy, as I mentioned, towards others, then you can understand how people feel and you can help others. And you can strengthen relationships in your community with the group of people that went through the same as you. Gaining perspective. So I think once you go through challenge, you become more grateful with what you have, because you understand you don't take things for granted anymore. So for example, after the burnout, I have another, I'm more grateful towards my mental health because I know what's not having it. And I compare, but every day that I'm okay with my mind and with my anxiety, it's a beautiful day. So it became so much more grateful after that. Encouraging self-reflection, so that what we call the inner transformation that we talk in Spiritism all the time. So I think you learn a lot from that as well. If you have the mindset that you're growing through that experience and not becoming a victim or going against it all the time. Promoting change, so you can have these painful experiences to be a catalyst for change, motivating others to make the change as well. As such as leaving a toxic relationship, changing careers, adopting healthier habits. Fostering gratitude as well, improving problem-solving skills. So many people that went through challenges dealing with other people now, they are really skillful in that sense because they can manage people better. Strengthening community bonds and enhancing creativity. So a lot of people go through challenges and they become artists, they are writers, painters, so many ways to help them deal with that. And it's important when we go through this to understand how many of those things I got from my last challenge that I had, or maybe a trauma, and how I am, and this helps you become the person that you are today. And another really interesting research that I was learning online. So there is something they called the Razor test. So they tested 20,000 people that had difficulties or traumas, and they asked if you could erase that experience from your life, erasing that trauma, that difficulty, but also erasing everything that you learned from it, all the friends that you make in the process, every lesson that you learn, everything, would you do it? And 99.9% of people said no. They prefer to keep it as is because they learned so much. They got all these benefits, and they became something, someone that is more skillful and more grateful. And the person that you are is a result of all of that. So the idea is, if extrapolating the idea, if 99.9% of all the difficulties and traumas that you go through life, it's gonna get you most of those benefits, and you don't want to erase it, why do you think that specific challenge is the one that's gonna keep you down, or it's gonna be the one that it's gonna ruin your life in that sense? So it's really interesting to think about that. So you're going to be fine 99.9% of the time. So what can you do? So it's all of the engaging in resignation. So that's something that really happened, that really helps. And it's also interesting to think and repair all the wrongs in this life, from this life in this life. So there's no wrong left to be more painfully repaired later. So if there's something that could be somebody that you need to say to forgive, or something that you actually need to ask for forgiveness, it's always good to do this in this life, so you don't have to you don't need another difficulty or another trial later on. And to end, blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be comforted. So that's from Jesus. So that's the idea of how you can deal with all the challenges and difficulties in life. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Nothing that we needed today, obviously. I know that's just for the other people in the world that need that. So many nuggets that I think it's very important for us to think about it and to develop, right? I love every single part, so thank you so much. Do we have any comments online? No? Anyone here? Comments,
we have
questions?
time, so if you want to make any comments or questions, anything that you stuck with you or experience that you went through?
I think for me, it was really interesting, the study that you brought, that 99.9% of the people wanted to remain with their difficulties, right? And it's funny because in my mind, when you said that, I thought when we are going through, that's the least thing we think, right? You just want to take this away from me. And in thinking that, I started thinking myself, like, do I want to remain with mine? All the hardship? And I feel like if you truly think about, that's who you are today. It's because of all of that that you are where you are today. So imagine if you take that away, who would you be, right? And I feel that for me was like so important, because when we are going through the difficult, that's the least we think, right? We don't think on all the points that you brought about our growth and where we're going to become and everything, right? We only focus our mind into the hardship and like, I don't want this, I cannot handle this and all of that. But if you look at the macro picture and you think and remember that God only gives you the cross that you can carry. Even though it might feel that is so heavy right now, it's not something that is beyond your capability. So I think that reminded me of everything that you said. I was like, yeah, that's deep. That's deep.
Yes.
Are there spiritists? The twins?
Sorry?
If the twins were spiritists.
Oh no, they're Jews. Yeah, but I mean, all the teachings about forgiveness, as I was reading, it's like feels like spiritism.
Yeah.
But as she mentioned, it goes beyond any religion. So
that's true.
It's a shame for us.
Yeah.
It's a shame for us.
Yeah.
Spiritists.
Yes, it is. It is. And it's interesting what she brought there, right? Because it's forgiving, not forgetting. It's not that you are taking away the pain and the suffering, but in the end, if you realize, right, when you have resentment towards someone, it hurts you. It doesn't hurt that person. So the forgiveness is for you, it's not for that person, right? And that's exactly what she wrote, is like taking the pain from my chest. Like, I don't care about him, but I care about my own well-being. And I think that's also really hard, right? Because that means that you are letting it go.
Because forgiveness is also freedom.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I think like in my personal life, right, I had some issues with like one of my best friends back home. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I forgave her. I'm okay. And then the first time I saw her after years, I was like, that pain came through. I'm like, damn it, I didn't forgive her. And it's interesting, right? Because it's like, it's easier because it wasn't in my face. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not seeing her until everything is fine. Until you face through that, like in my mind, I'm like, God was like, let's test if you did it right. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, let's start again. But again, right, like we are here to learn and grow, and I think that's, as long as we keep doing our best, as long as we keep trying to improve day after day, that's what matters, right? And it's interesting because my therapist once told me that what is, I need translating my mind now. But he basically said, like, you learn how, like a kid learn how to walk, and it's not that they are not gonna fall, but it's that it's gonna be easier to get up. So that in my mind was like, that's what I try to keep in my mind, was like, it's not that because I learned how to deal with it, that it's never gonna happen again. It's just that it's gonna be easier the next time.
Experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, go ahead.
We have a comment here from Nadia.
Mm-hmm.
She's saying one comment is to try to pray, to ask for what is best for me, involve God in the important decisions.
Yes, for sure. Because not always we know what is best for us, right? And that's what Isa said earlier, right?
When you touched upon sort of the anxiety, the depression, or the frustration when stuff happens to you, I know for me it was a huge turning point when I realized that I created that, I chose that, I designed it, and so suddenly you go from being a victim to being like a student of the whole situation. And you start to ask, what can I learn from this? And you suddenly take power of the direction of your life. So that's a very big one. I know it was a big one for me. And just what you said, when things happen and you think you've gotten over them, you think you've forgiven them, then there's always a little test to say, are you really? And yeah, that's absolutely true. So
Yeah.
it never really ends. But yeah, you chose that, and that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Another great difficulty that I forgot to mention for the lecture. So dealing with my mediumship, I think it was one of the biggest challenges of my life. So growing up, I was a very moody child because I was always feeling the energy around me, and some days I would be very angry. Other days I would feel like crying all the time. And growing up like this was like the sponge medium that they call it. So you're always like getting the energy around you. And some situations that I'll always pass out, or my blood pressure was very low without any physical cause. So I went through that many times. And as I started to learn about spiritism, I was 14 years old. So I was like, oh, this can help me. So I started learning, and but I actually at the time I just wanted a shortcut. I just wanted something like to cure me and to be fine. So I was testing like, what's the minimal involvement that I need to be cured and to be fine? And I realized there's no shortcut. So I had to learn and to deal with it and to control it. And the moment that I was able to understand what it's really something from my that I created versus an influence was a huge different challenge. Sorry, difference in my mind. So when I was able to separate and then understand that if it's maybe energy or spiritism that is feeling something that it's making me feel the sentiments, and from that I was able to, if I know that, now I can pray, now I can do like some things to help me. So that was one of the biggest difficulty to learn that, and it took so many years and took so many spiritual centers and so many meetings with people to learn. And that's the reason why I'm here. I was looking for a shortcut. I didn't want to like involve myself too much, but now I was like, no, I have to go through that. That's something that I asked for. So and I work now in the mediumistic meetings in the spirit center. I'm a very beginner medium, so still like in the very early stages. But this is something that brings me the most joy and my purpose. So when it's started doing it, this feels right. This is what I need. This is exactly what's going to help me, and that's what keeps me sane. Because if you have any kind of ostensive mediumship, there is no other way. Like you have to learn, you have to go through it, and it brings me a lot of joy to be able to use it for the good of others.
And I think it's an interesting word you put it there. That's what I asked for. right? And that's what we forget, right? Like the purpose of reincarnating is erasing, putting everything in the closed box, and then you only open that box when you come back, because that is the test, right? Did you actually learn everything that you did in the last life? And we forget that we asked for most of the things. Like we don't necessarily ask for every single thing, because a lot is a consequence of our actions here as well. But you made your main points when you came here, like, okay, I'm going to go through a cancer because I want to learn how to be resilient. I'm going to go through a divorce or a hardship, or I'm going to be rich so I can learn how to be charitable. So we ask everything, but when we come here, we forget, obviously, because that's the test. And I think when we realize, and as you said as well, right, like when we realize that we are in charge of it, that everything is not because we are a victim, you see the things differently. And I think we put more attention to it. And I think that's what helps us grow faster in a way. Yes, go ahead.
And also on the subject of suffering, it's something that I mentioned about the meeting before. One thing that we do in psychology, for example, with a patient that is very negative in the way that they're thinking, is, for example, we have something that we call like an inversion of sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine, for example, have somebody that played with their kids, but he was sick.
Mm-hmm.
So the person that is very negative, he is always ending everything on the negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying like, oh, I was playing with my kids, but oh, I'm so sick, so bad, I'm suffering so much. And usually the psychologist is going to invite the patient to invert the sentence.
Mm.
So you're going to say, I was sick, but I played with my kids and it was so good.
Mm.
So the way that you change your thoughts, you can actually give like a different value, right? So we do have two objective facts. You played with your kids and you also was sick.
Mm-hmm.
But how much value we put on each of these things is really up to us, right? So the facts are objective. They're not part of us, they're part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the control of how much value we're going to put on each of these things, right? So but part of the suffering is how much we understand the things,
Mm-hmm.
how much value we put on the negative things, right?
Yeah.
And this is something we can actually change. We have control of this. Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really interesting. I tried to do that to myself. Reverting, put the bad first and the good after.
Yeah.
So we focus on the good. That's true. That's psychology is fascinating.
Yeah, just quickly on the forgiveness. I know that we all struggle, and I think the first step that back to that to forget. But one thing that the service teach us and helps a lot, and is to understand the laws, the natural laws, right? Whatever we do, we will be responsible. That's why we are never a victim.
Yeah.
And when we know that, it's not that we are cursing anyone who did something wrong towards us. It's just the natural law. We look after that. And that gives us consolation. And that's in a mediumistic meeting. Sometimes when the spirit comes and like obsessing somebody and they're very angry towards someone. And once they realize that they are stuck on that situation and they are not moved on, and if they can let it go, because there is a natural law, a divine law that will look at them, then they get his freedom or her freedom, right? And and that helps us go through the process of forgiveness.
It's true. Any other comments? No? Okay, thank you, Isa. Thank you those who join us online. I hope you guys have a lovely Sunday and see you next week. So we're gonna get ready for